Hi, and thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to be talking about trauma-informed protocol. Trauma-informed protocol is a very important part of holding space in a trauma-informed way. When we hold space, we are holding a clean container. It is always about the student. It is never about the teacher. So we need to be able to put our experiences aside and hold a compassionate container for our students. When we're working with individuals who have experienced trauma, it's important to remember that consistency and setting expectations are top of mind. People who've experienced trauma don't like surprises. It makes them feel uneasy or anxious. And these surprises can derail your effort to create a trauma-informed space. The most important part of trauma-informed protocol is to explicitly lay out the structure of the class for your students. Allowing your students to have autonomy is also very important. This is the foundation of trauma-informed practices. When you are teaching yoga asana to a group of trauma-informed participants, you want to make sure that you are explicitly outlining the structure of class. From the very beginning, you want to introduce yourself. Let them know who you are and what you do. Let them know what type of class you are hosting and how long the class will be. Right away, give them options in the event that they don't want to take a particular pose. Let them know it's okay for them to just sit in quiet contemplation or lay down in constructive rest. That their practice is their practice and they have 100% autonomy over it. Let your students know that they have permission to opt out of essential oils or adjust and assist. Again, this reinforces their autonomy and helps them to know that you care about their well-being. When you're working with trauma-informed populations, it's important to give many different options. It's important to let students know that if they prefer not to take cat-cow, they can always take a seated variation. If they prefer not to lay in shavasana, they can always take shavasana in a comfortable seat. If they prefer not to close their eyes, they can always allow their gaze to soften or select a drishti to focus on. It's also important to coach your clients and students in group asana settings to let them know that at any time they can modify or amend their postures. Avoid using competitive terminology or cues. Reinforce students' ability to choose and select options. Resist the urge to polarize certain practices or poses. Avoid telling the class how a posture should feel in their body, and avoid calling students out in practice. An alternative might be to tell the entire class that they're doing a great job, or you might tell the entire class that they can select a different option if the option you are offering does not serve their practice today. Resist using cues like fullest expression or using cues that might be activating for people who have experienced trauma. Let people know up front what shavasana is and what to expect. Sometimes I'll tell students that shavasana occurs at the end of class and is a time for integration. At that point, I let students know that they can either rest in Shavasana laying down, or they can find Shavasana in a comfortable seat. If you're teaching in a studio, you might also avoid turning the lights completely off for Shavasana. If the studio's already dimly lit, you can leave it as is. If the lights are bright, slowly turn them down to halfway so that students can relax without being startled. At the end of practice, slowly bring students back up to a comfortable seat. It's important to be available after class when you teach in trauma-informed settings. It's important to let students ask questions, and you can answer them and redirect them back to yoga when necessary. Sometimes we find that students in trauma-informed settings want to process after practice. This is outside of the scope of work of a yoga teacher. You can always refer students back to the sutras, or you can suggest journaling practices. This is a form of svadhyaya, or self-study, and is healthy and appropriate when we are working through traumatic experiences. Ultimately, the most important part of trauma-informed protocols are that you explicitly lay out what students should expect from start to finish. Let them know who you are, the length of the class, the type of the class, and how Shavasana will go. You might even ask everyone to stay on their mat until the end of class, unless they need to use the restroom. Specifically, when I am teaching trauma-informed classes, I tend to remind people during Shavasana to stay on their mat so that everyone feels safe and secure. It can be unnerving for someone to get up and walk around the room when people are resting in Shavasana, especially for a trauma-informed population. As you move through the practice, use cues that are neutral and avoid projection or polarizing cues or comments. Allow yourself to be available after class to support the students' needs, but remember that we are not there to help them cognitively process their trauma. We're only there to hold space and facilitate a mind-body connection. I hope you found this lecture helpful. Be well, yogis. Namaste.